In 2020, allegations surfaced that rocked the wrestling world. But as we dug deeper into Alberto Del Rio's case, we uncovered information that made us question everything. Are you ready for the truth? Alberto Del Rio, born Jose A. Rodriguez Chiquan, came from wrestling royalty. His father, Dos Caras, was a Mexican wrestling legend. From a young age, Alberto was destined for greatness in the ring. He started his career in Mexico, quickly rising through the ranks and becoming a standout performer. But it was his transition to WWE that really put him on the map. Alberto Del Rio burst onto the scene, winning both the WWE Championship and World Heavyweight Championship twice. He was charismatic, talented, and seemed to have it all. You'd think this was a story of success, right? Well, as we're about to see, things aren't always what they seem. In fact, the contrast between Alberto's public image and private life was about to come into sharp focus. But as they say, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And for Alberto Del Rio, that fall was about to be spectacular. In 2020, the wrestling world was rocked by allegations that would forever change how we viewed this once beloved superstar. Let's look at what happened. Del Rio was arrested and charged with beating and raping a woman. If that wasn't shocking enough, he was also accused of threatening her child. These weren't just minor accusations. They were serious criminal charges that could have landed him in prison for years. Now, you might be thinking, surely this must be a misunderstanding, right? After all, Del Rio was a household name in wrestling. But as the details emerged, fans were left stunned and divided. Some expressed their shock and disappointment. You see, Del Rio had gone from headlining WrestleMania and being a multi-time WWE champion to, well, let's just say his career took a nosedive. One fan summed it up perfectly. This guy went from being at WrestleMania and being WWE champion multiple times to working high school gyms. Of course, not everyone was sympathetic. Some fans felt Del Rio had brought this on himself. Another fan commented, "It's his fault. His actions made him pay for the consequences." It's a harsh judgment, but was it justified? To understand that, we need to look at Del Rio's history. You see, this wasn't the first time he'd been in hot water. In fact, his career had been plagued by controversies for years. Let's rewind to 2014. Del Rio was fired by WWE for what they called unprofessional conduct. What happened? Well, he reportedly slapped a social media manager named Cody Barbieri. Del Rio claimed Barbieri had made a racist joke and slapped him after he refused to apologize. But whatever the truth, it cost him his job. Then there was the incident in 2017 at Orlando International Airport. Del Rio was involved in a domestic battery incident with his then girlfriend, Paige, another professional wrestler. Now, Paige stated that he didn't lay a hand on her during the incident, but it still raised eyebrows. These controversies took their toll. After a brief return to WWE between 2015 and 2016, Del Rio found himself wrestling on the independent circuit. And when I say independent, I mean really independent. We're talking school gyms with sparse crowds, It's a far cry from the packed arenas and championship belts of his WWE days. But here's the thing. Del Rio's questionable behavior didn't start when he joined WWE. Even during his initial negotiations with the company, he played some, let's say, interesting games. He announced he was re-signing with CMLL only to debut in WWE's development territory, FCW, just a few months later. It's not illegal, but it's not exactly above board either. So when the 2020 allegations hit, they didn't come out of nowhere. They were the latest in a long line of controversies that had slowly but surely chipped away at Del Rio's reputation. The charges were eventually dropped in December of 2021 when a witness failed to appear in court. But by then, the damage was done. You might think that Alberto Del Rio's rise to WWE stardom was a smooth journey, but behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. Let's look at what was really happening backstage during Del Rio's time in WWE. On camera, Del Rio portrayed a charismatic, successful wrestler, but off camera, his relationships with colleagues and management were far from picture perfect. In fact, they were often strained and complicated. You see, Del Rio had a reputation for being difficult to work with, and this reputation would eventually catch up with him. Reports of Del Rio being involved in backstage fights and altercations began to surface. For example, at an indie show in Puerto Rico, Del Rio was attacked, leading to conflicting stories about what actually happened. But it wasn't just his professional relationships that were tumultuous. Del Rio's personal life also became a source of controversy. In 2016, he began dating fellow wrestler Paige. Their relationship quickly became public, and they were soon engaged. But it wasn't all hearts and roses. Their relationship was marked by frequent public altercations. One particularly troubling incident occurred at Orlando International Airport. Witnesses reported seeing Del Rio lay his hands on Paige, which led to her throwing a drink at him and screaming for him to leave her alone. It's the kind of scene you'd expect in a WWE storyline, not in real life. As more stories like these emerged, Del Rio's colleagues and insiders began to paint a picture of a man with violent tendencies. There were multiple incidents that led to police intervention, including assaults and accusations of domestic violence. Of course, it's important to note that in December 2021, charges against Del Rio for alleged battery and sexual assault were dropped after a witness failed to appear in court. But by then, the damage to his reputation was already done. So how did all this affect Del Rio's career? Well, backstage politics play a huge role in wrestling, and Del Rio's behavior certainly influenced his trajectory. Despite initially having strong support from WWE, his personal conduct and the controversy surrounding him led to a decline in his standing within the company. When he returned to WWE in 2015, he was promised a main event push. But that push never really materialized. Instead, he ended up violating the WWE wellness policy and left the company again in 2016. The contrast between Del Rio's public persona and his private behavior is stark. On screen, He was a successful and charismatic wrestler. Off-screen, his reputation was marred by allegations of violence and unprofessionalism. It's a reminder that in wrestling, as in life, what we see on the surface isn't always the full story. Del Rio's fall from grace was dramatic. He went from being a top WWE star to performing at smaller venues. It's a clear illustration of how off-screen actions can have a massive impact on a wrestler's career. In Del Rio's case, his backstage behavior and personal controversies overshadowed his in-ring talents, leading to a downward spiral that would be hard to recover from. As Del Rio's personal life began to unravel, the wrestling world watched in shock. It seemed like everywhere you looked, there was another story about Del Rio's fall from grace. Of course, the wrestling promotions themselves had to respond. WWE, Del Rio's former employer, had already cut ties with him long before these allegations surfaced. Remember, they had fired him back in 2014 for unprofessional conduct after he reportedly slapped their social media manager. They fired him again in 2016 after he violated the WWE wellness policy. It's safe to say that WWE wanted nothing to do with Del Rio by this point. But what about his fellow wrestlers? Well, one voice stood out among the rest. Paige, Del Rio's former girlfriend. She publicly described the abuse she suffered during the relationship, which included both physical and mental torment. It was a shocking revelation that painted a disturbing picture of Del Rio behind closed doors. The long-term consequences for Del Rio's career have been severe. You know how wrestling is all about big arenas and screaming fans? Well, for Del Rio, those days are long gone. His name has been largely blacklisted in major wrestling promotions. Instead of performing in packed stadiums, he's now relegated to much smaller venues like school gyms. It's a far cry from the bright lights of WWE. In fact, footage emerged of Del Rio performing in front of a sparse crowd at a school gym. For fans who remembered his days as a top WWE star, it was a stark reminder of how far he had fallen. This wasn't just a temporary setback. It was a complete reversal of fortune. The public discourse around Del Rio has shifted dramatically. Once seen as a rising star with unlimited potential, is now viewed as a cautionary tale. His career trajectory serves as a stark reminder about the impact of personal conduct on professional success. In the world of wrestling, where image is everything, Del Rio's actions have effectively ended his time in the spotlight. Now, you might think we've heard the whole story about Alberto Del Rio. But what if I told you there's more to this tale? Let's look at some new information that could change everything we thought we knew. You see, while the allegations against Del Rio were serious, there are some inconsistencies we need to consider. For example, the charges from his 2020 arrest were eventually dropped. Why? Because a key witness failed to appear in court. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean Del Rio is innocent, but it does raise some questions. And here's something interesting. Despite all the controversy, Del Rio still has supporters in the wrestling world. Some of his former colleagues have spoken out, saying there's more to the story than what's been reported. Of course, We can't ignore the serious allegations against him, but it's worth asking, do we have the full picture?